Good morning, Karen.
Good morning, Ron.
I have so been looking forward to this conversation, and especially to tell you the story of Bob, which of course is, that's not really his name, but it's a great starting point because I really think he believes the whole purpose of his life is to live effortlessly, to live behind a white picket fence surrounded by tulips, and that it shouldn't require really anything difficult, challenging, etc. And I asked him this question, which was the one that I wanted to sort of lead us into, which is, Bob, is that realistic? I mean, does that really seem to be the way life works? That's our question to start us off, Karen. Is it realistic to think we should have an effortless life?
Well, I think many of us would certainly at some level like to have that, although I guess the question that comes to my mind is it in our best interest to live effortlessly? Is that, safe, comfortable, white picket fence with the tulips really what will serve us best? Because it's my view that we are designed to be growing and stretching and being challenged at some level. So, for example, the happiest people that I know are not the people who are, leaned back on the porch, but who are leaned forward and really engaged and challenged in their lives. So, I don't know, what do you think about that, Ron?
Well, I like your language that we're designed to be stretched. And what got me thinking about was, you're right, the people I've worked with, the people I've coached, etc. I mean, you're absolutely right. They tend to be pretty engaged and putting forth effort in some way, shape, or form, whether it's, for the passion of an artistic expression or the work that they do or their family or their community. They're drawn forward by it. I mean, it drives and propels them. In some ways, it's almost as if it gives meaning to their lives. So immediately where I go with that is, and I hope you're okay with this word, I sort of set it up this way, but I mean, what are the best ways to effort then? I mean, that's the question that comes up is, so if it's true that we're designed to be stretched, then there must be better ways and less good ways. And I guess the question there is, what's your perspective on that?
I love some of the language that you use there, Ron. So they're drawn forward and it gives meaning to their lives. And I think meaning, that word is so important to have some sense of meaning. So when Bob was thinking about how nice it would be to be, have the white picket fence and tulips, what's the meaning of that life? Who's really receiving value from that life? I mean, yes, maybe Bob is happy, but how is the world benefiting? And so I think, before we get to your point about how do we do that, I think it's also important to say that the more meaning, the more powerful meanings we have in our lives, the more we feel a sense of purpose and contribution and that what we do makes a difference, then the happier we are. And, study after study has certainly proven that. And I think also part of it is about this attitude toward it. So, for example, Bob's attitude toward efforting was it was something to be avoided. It was not the direction he wanted to go. And yet the people that we've talked about who are the happiest and who are drawn forward and have meaning in their lives, I think they see efforting as part of their growth, part of the value they add to the world, even without thinking about how do you go about in the best way with efforting or not. I think it's important to say, if we call it efforting, then it will be efforting. And if we call it growing and being challenged and learning, the metaphor that I use a lot of times with my clients is, would it be nice to repeat the 5th grade sometimes because you could do it, except maybe the math? Maybe math has progressed beyond what I could do, but going back to the 5th grade and repeating that might be comfortable and convenient, but most of us would be bored silly. I sort sort of derailed your question, but what thoughts do you have about just kind of the idea that attitude toward efforting and how it serves us or not?
I think you're right on, Karen. The idea that it is about the attitude, about the perspective we bring to it, whether we use a word or not, although obviously the words we use signal how it is we're thinking and feeling about things. So perhaps effort is not a word. Maybe we should christen it play, but then people would balk at that. It's like, well, it doesn't feel like play. Where I went to with that, though, Karen, is what you talked about is a reframing that takes place. It's how we view it. And at a minimum, what I heard you saying is there's an acceptance that comes to us, that there comes a moment where we are, by virtue of the reframing, we are embracing this, what we're calling effort that's required. We're engaged, willingly engaged, and that creates a kind of a fertile ground for us to engage it differently. And of course, you have to say, I mean, this is that old truth that we've heard quite often. You have to deal with the issue of contrast, because you're right. I mean, if all you did was sit on a swing amid the tulips every day for 16 hours a day, it's a pretty safe bet that at some point that would no longer hold the value, that there's some incredible value in the contrast between rest and effort, I guess may be a way to say it. So am I tracking where you were tracking?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think we're sharing kind of the same concepts with our listeners, and that I think we could certainly look at what we could suggest in terms of the ways of taking this concept and applying it really fully in people's lives.
So tell me, when you encounter this with clients, this reframing, what is it that tells you that someone is laboring or stuck? How do you know when reframing is needed, that a perspective isn't serving someone? What are the signs of that?
That's a great question. You highlighted some of it with Bob, where there's a perspective that is, as you put it, unrealistic, or a perspective that just at some level is creating that frustration, discontent. So yes, a client's frustration that things aren't the way they should be. I mean, don't we hear it all the time as coaches? You know, I should be further along. I shouldn't have this problem. When I'm hearing a frustration, life's not fair, that kind of thing, and the language, I know that somebody is efforting when life becomes all about them, and so the focus is, you know, what am I getting, what am I putting out? And again, you know, I have a belief that the purpose of our lives is to be out there serving each other, and so usually when people are just focused on themselves like that and they're frustrated, I can tell that they're way off of any sense of purpose and meaning to their lives. So that's my perspective around it, and how about you?
I'm going to pick up on a couple words you used because they make perfectly good sense, and then you used a phrase that I think sums this exploration up pretty effectively. You talked about the presence of frustration and discontent, which I think are exceptionally good descriptors of when we know that we've got a need for a reframing. And then you said the language roughly was when things aren't as they should be, kind of I guess I would characterize that as a lack of acceptance for how they are, and the resulting inability to engage because of frustration and discontent. So it looks to me like what we're dealing with here is this perception that causes us problems, particularly as it regards our engaging life and the, I hate to call it effort, but the effort required to engage life. So if that seems like a good framing to you, Karen, I suggest that we make a transition into talking about what we can do about such things.
Let's do that.